It's that time of the week again. Time for some virtual racing here in the Echelon Racing League as we get ready for the virtual Joe Martin stage race with the Devil's Den time trial this afternoon, followed by a road race tomorrow and then the Experience Fayetteville Criterium on Sunday. Brad Soner here with Frankie Andreu and Phil Stevens as we get ready for a virtual time trial here. Frankie, a format that we piloted at the Redlands Bicycle Classic. We sort of saw our first time trial of the Echelon Racing League. Short, uphill and fast. I love the time trials that we've been seeing here on RGT.
Yeah, it's going to be a good test for a lot of the riders. And as you just mentioned, the time trial here at Joe Martin is going to be very similar to the one at Redlands. It's about 3 miles long. It's going to kick up. It's going to be steep. There's got some sections where you're going to have to keep it rolling, and you're going to have to take into account some of the switchbacks to be able to handle those turns. And so I like this time trial format because it gives you an idea of who's going good, who's looking to be able to do well here at the Joe Martin stage race. And the time trial really sets things off on a good foot for whatever rider can cross that time or do the best time.
Let's talk about where things stand going into the day today because we have a new overall leader here in the Echelon Racing League. Pro men up first this weekend as they swap with the women. Matt Usborne moving into the lead with 157 points, knocking Ben Thomas down to second for Team Tour 2000, presented by Callis at 146 points. Charlie Revel sitting in third place with his Team Tour 2000 teammate Ben Thomas, and then Tom Thrall down to fourth place for the Insured, presented by Pedal Power Team, sitting right there with Neil Ulstenfeld, his teammate, in fifth place. A little further down, Draft Racing has two as well with Will Harden and Ryan Ruderham. Sorry about that. Ryan Rutherham in seventh, Charlie Velez in eighth, Bruce Bird in ninth, and then Hayden Warner in 10th place. Let's take a look at team standings as well because these are starting to widen a little bit here. Insured, presented by Pedal Power, widening their lead over Team Tour 2000 this week with 379 total points. Again, this is all of the riders competing on the team together in the team series points for the entire Echelon Racing League. So Insured, presented by Pedal Power, looking to widen their lead out there today. All right, now let's move on to talking a little bit about the course here as these guys get ready. Now, Frankie, there's 30-second intervals for these riders to take off, but a lot of riders going to be warming up for 30, 40, 50 minutes beforehand. So you're seeing the riders getting into the Zoom room now. I want to talk about the course that they're tackling out there today here because it is very similar to what we saw in Redlands. Frankie, I want to start with you. A lot of the uphill comes early on in this one. They kind of do this winding uphill and then across the ridge to the finish.
Yeah, starting down at Devil's Den State Park right next to the lake. That's the warm-up area normally, and it is steeper in the bottom part of the climb. Again, you got the switchbacks, but this part we're seeing right here, this is where you really got to keep it rolling. You got to keep the momentum, so you got to save something for that final portion of the race. You can see maximum gradient of 9.5%, average gradient of 6%. It's a tough start for the Joe Martin stage race.
And Phil, narrow on the way up as well. That might be the defining factor of this race. Oh, sorry about that. We'll try and get Phil in here. Frankie, on the way up here, it is narrow. I mean, you're talking about maybe less than 2 lanes either way. I'm not sure if we still have Phil with us. Phil, can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you. Sorry about that.
Yeah, so talk to me about the way up. I mean, it looked pretty narrow out there.
Yeah, it is very narrow, and the switchbacks are at a good camber. So having good bike handling skills and picking a good line will definitely help you a lot in the real world.
Yeah, exactly. Talk to me about what the finish is like. I mean, is it uphill all the way to the line? Does it sort of flatten out a little bit in the last kilometer or so?
There's the ridge, and it sort of winds around, and there's some trees and property along the way that doesn't let you see the finish line right away. But when you get there, it is a little bit of a drag after you've already spent yourself early on. It's easy to go too early.
Frankie, we saw this in the Redlands time trial. The intermediate is going to give us a little bit of information, but it is so important that you save some energy. And it's really tough trying to time something. It's going to be like a 9-minute time trial out there today. That's a really tough effort to time, isn't it?
Well, in real life, if we look at 2019, Stephen Bassett won in a 9:17. And so the bottom part is steep, but that's really the steeper part is where you can make the time up on the other riders. So yes, you have to save something for the end, but being only 3 miles, you talked about the warm up being important. Yeah, 30, 40-minute warm-up. The start is going to be critical, and they're just going to have to keep their momentum, and hopefully they don't blow up. And whoever doesn't blow up is going to end up being the winner.
I have a feeling the riders that did that Redlands time trial will have a little bit of an advantage here, not only knowing what that effort is like on the trainer, but also knowing what that effort is like on the platform. We talked about some of the differences between the road racing and what they're doing in the time trial here. Frankie, I understand you had a chance to jump on RGT or jump in your first race here over the last couple of weeks. Is that right?
I did. I did the category 2 for the criterium. Jumped in, and you know what? I found it's very hard to kind of feather your power to stay in the group. I was off the back, and then all of a sudden I'd like put in big power and I'd go off the front, and then I'd sit up to be able to get back with the group, and I'd be off the back. And of course, in that, Joe Martin criterium is one of the hardest ones around. So you hit that steep section, and it was flat out, big watts. But after 5 laps, I was dropped, completely dropped. I rode 2 more laps by myself, and then I just quit.
Well, I can't blame you. It's tough riding out there. It's certainly a little bit different from the real life riding, but we are starting to really see the riders learn the platform, get better and better on the platform. The riders with experience on the virtual racing platform definitely pays off. Phil, I want to go to you next because I think the same thing applies in real life. We see a lot of riders that have been there before that do well in the time trial, but this is also really important in the GC. It seems like just about every year, this opening time trial or this early short time trial plays a big part in the GC.
It does. The teams definitely get a pecking order set up, and it sets up the road racing for duties and what's going on for the team tactics, trying to rally and be in the best position going into the criterium at the end.
Frank, as a team director, I mean, that can be crucial, sort of setting up the rest of your week. If you've got 1 rider or 2 riders that are in contention for GC, a lot of times that dictates what your playbook is going to look like for the rest of the week.
Yeah, for insured pedal power, I mean, they're going to have all of their guys go as hard. I mean, I think for every team, all your guys go as hard as you can. I can remember, as a director setting up in that state park, everybody on the turbo trainers, telling everybody, the more guys you have up there to be in contention or within, 5 or 10 seconds, the better. And so this is going to be a big test for many of the teams that are coming out here. First Internet Bank, they're going to be riding us the first time they'll be doing the virtual Joe Martin along with everybody else. But, we should be able to expect some good things from them. But having more guys up there to be able to fight through the road race and the criterium definitely will be an advantage for any team that has numbers.
And remember, they're racing on the GC for the weekend, and that gets turned into Omnium points for the overall here at the Echelon Racing League. Let's take a look at the special rules for the time trial racing here today. They still have the physics of the riding that we talked about, but drafting is turned off for the time trial. So if the riders catch another rider or there's overlap, they're not drafting off of each other. They start in 30-second intervals, and it is just based on when they arrive, sort of like a random draw, I guess, because it is the first race of the weekend of the series here for the virtual Joe Martin stage race. Riders just leave the pen as they arrive at 30-second intervals. So we should see our first riders going off just a couple minutes after 6:10 Eastern time local here, although I guess that's 5:10 Central time. We should be on the local time of our host race there in Fayetteville, Arkansas. We're going to be talking a lot about Arkansas, a lot about Fayetteville, and a lot about, well, how awesome it is and the bike stuff going on in the state and city as we go throughout the weekend. Really looking forward to sharing some of the cool stuff coming up in Fayetteville and Arkansas. Frankie, we are almost to the end of the Echelon Racing League season here this year. It seems like it just started a few weeks ago as we began with the Railroad Stage Race. Then it went to Tour of the Gila. We had 2 criteria weekends with the Thompson-Bucks County Classic, then the Armed Forces Cycling Classic, followed by Gateway Cup, and then Redlands, our last event. Joe Martin today. We're headed to Indy Crit and Dirty Reaver, 2 one-day races on the February 20th and 21st weekend, and then wrapping things up with the Tour of America's Dairyland, March 11th through 14th. We've had a good mix of races, haven't we, this season here, Frankie? Good mix of long road races, good mix of tough time trials, and plenty of crits. My favorite.
Yeah, I think for every rider, whatever their specific strength is, the RGT platform has been able to play into them having a good time racing. With the time trials, the criteriums, the road races, we've seen some of the road races going almost up to 2 hours, and that's a long time on a trainer going redlined. And so it really has been a good assortment of different courses to kind of appeal to all the different rider strengths and weaknesses. I mean, it definitely exploits some people's weaknesses, being able to adjust to the RGT platform, but also maybe you're not a good criterium rider or a time trialist. That comes out. And so I think a lot of riders can benefit from doing these events to kind of find out where those weaknesses may be.
Yeah, and again, a huge opportunity for riders to be able to preview these courses that they're going to be hopefully racing on in 2021 or into 2022. Good chance to, do the recon that you just couldn't do if you weren't able to travel in person. So hopefully riders will take advantage of that. Obviously, these courses will live on RGT, so ahead of the IRL, in real life, real world racing, the riders will be able to go and take a look at the courses. All right, so it looks like our first rider's just getting ready to roll out of the start pen. Again, 30-second intervals. We are going to have some of our camera bots riders rolling out here shortly, but looks like Chris Uberti will be the first rider on the start list out there today. Frankie, any advantage psychologically to being the first or last rider? Normally we talk about conditions, right? Wind, rain, something like that. Obviously that doesn't change here in the virtual world, so it's really just a matter of whether you want to set the time or you want to be chasing a time.
Yeah, and a lot of it's maybe if you even know the time that you're going for. But on a short, I don't think you can pace yourself much by knowing the time already ahead of time. Again, it's only 3 miles. If anything, Christopher Uberti will be a little bit at a disadvantage considering he's an aerodynamic engineer for General Motors. That's really not going to come into play here in the virtual world. But Uberti's a very strong rider, great at criteriums. He pretty much does everything, track racing, cross. And so it'll be interesting to see. It'll be a good time marker of what he does to see how everybody else does as we see Furman right now out on course.
Well, again, early times, fast times, looking right around the 9-minute mark, somewhere around there. We did have some riders take a look at this course earlier in the day. For European riders, they had an earlier time slot that they were allowed to take. So we'll talk about some of those times as we get a little closer. But right now, watching Jamie Furman from the XXX Racing Atletico squad out of Chicago, Illinois, sitting on the front, working his way up the uphill time trial course here. Got to say, like the new graphics here in RGT. See the new leaderboard on the left-hand side of the screen. A little different than the other broadcasts that we've had on the Echelon Racing League. RGT rolled out a huge update over the last couple days. They've got some new graphics. They've got some new physics. They've got some new gameplay features. Always good to see the game keep changing out there. So I think the addition of the jerseys might be the coolest thing for me, Frankie. That's going to make it a lot easier to keep track of these guys.
Yeah, it should be easier to kind of keep track of who's who and be able to pinpoint it, but also being able to see the highlighted rider there, I think, is good. As you just noticed, the dark of Schwint, and so now you can look up and see he's doing about 400 watts, which is good. And so Schwint obviously striking out from above and beyond cancer immediately, and really bringing back a ton of time off of Furman as only 30 seconds apart, and he's almost brought back 30 seconds immediately.
Oh, Schwent already catching his Minuteman here on Furman. And Schwent living the blue life here.
See him out of the saddle on some of the tougher sections. And, Brad, you had mentioned some of the riders were able to take a earlier start time, like for the riders that were living in Europe or whoever kind of chose to be able to go off earlier. And so last time I checked, Ben Thomas, who's sitting second overall in the Echelon Racing League, he has the fastest time at 8 minutes and 51 seconds. And so that's the time that all of these riders, I guarantee, know 8 minutes and 51 seconds is what they're striving to try to be up there to be able to beat Ben Thomas to take over that number one spot.
Yeah, anything under 9 minutes is going to be considered a good day out there on the bike for sure. Phil, I want to talk about the area that they're riding in. They call it the Devil's Den State Park. It's got a pretty cool story behind the area that they're racing in, but it really is a beautiful place to ride your bike.
It is. It's remote. One of the hassles in real life is not having good cell service because you are in so deep in the crack. In the park there, the Ozark National Forest. Originally it was constructed in the 1930s, part of FDR and Making America Better in their Conservation Corps programs. But it's really remote. It's got some great camping features and definitely a place to visit any time of the year, whether you're riding a bike or not.
I saw most of the geology is built around sandstone. There's all these caves throughout the park, throughout the area. That's where it got its name, Devil's Den. Some cool history there.
Yeah,
I noticed
that is for sure.
Go ahead, Phil.
Well, it's just really hard racing coming in, coming out. Some of the teams have trouble with their team vans finding space on the switchbacks. It really is impressive.
Yeah, it's a very windy road coming down from the freeway to get down to Devil's Den State Park. Because as you mentioned, Phil, it is a little bit remote. But you're talking about those caves. Looking up some information on there, they have all those caves that are around there, and I saw that they were closed back in 2010 because of a bat fungus that was called white nose syndrome, which grows on the bat's mouths and wings. And so they had to close it because these bats were endangered species, and they wanted to try to save them. And so I think that would have been pretty cool to be able to go kind of caving, to be able to explore some of those areas in that area.
Next year, Frankie, we'll do some spelunking at the 2021 Joe Martin stage race. I think I understand they also had like outlaws hiding out there back in the day. Phil, is that right? Is that where it got the name Devil's Den? Was it like all these cool outlaws hanging out with their cave clubs?
Yeah, for sure. Sandstone caves that provided excellent hiding places for the outlaws in the 1800s. So. And I'm sure there are a few Indian parts as well.
Good place
so right
to hide
now,
out
looking
when
at
you just need to eat some gels.
Yeah.
That's what Hayden Warner's going to be needing, some gels here, the way he's going. He's going at a good clip right now. Good climber, third at the Gila Monster, as Hayden Warner's out on course riding for Above and Beyond Cancer out of Iowa. He's got I wonder why they ride. We've seen this on a few guys on why they ride with headphones on. Maybe I could understand, having the earbuds in for the road race or the criterium, getting some tactics from your director, and maybe that's the same situation here in the time trial. But obviously, Hayden decided to be able to go with the full over-ear headphones, maybe some noise canceling to be able to not hear the turbo trainer.
Yeah, maybe trying to get focused, trying to watch some Netflix. Trying to drown out the announcers on the live stream. There's a lot of good reasons to wear a pair of headphones while you're out there riding. Here's Mike Swart getting his ride underway for the Restart Racing team. This guy has been a staple of the Echelon Racing League.
Seeing it pretty common right now, right at around 400 watts on certain portions of the course. He has just started off, so he's on the lower portion. So as we switched over now to Vogel, again, almost 500 watts. And so he just came off the line. Of Stefan Vogel from Project Echelon is now underway. Vogel out of North Carolina, actually goes to medical school at Wake Forest. And so the 31-year-old has been, he's been in many of the races also for the Echelon Racing League. I'm surprised there's no costume today for Swart.
Yeah, Swart usually has one of the better setups in the basement. I think he even turned a light on. I think it's brighter down there than it normally is. He usually has some sort of crazy hat or headband or headwear or something, but maybe he's saving that for later in the series.
Well, what I'm looking forward to is Valentine's Day should be coming up on February 14th. So we'll have to see what he pulls out for Valentine's Day as we take a look here at Draft Racing Bruce Bird.
Hey, speaking of Bruce's, I want to bring in Bruce Dunn, race director of the Joe Martin Stage Race, joining us here from Fayetteville or around Fayetteville. You never know with Bruce Dunn. This guy's all over the place. Bruce, can you hear us down there?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Hey, I can hear you loud and clear. Looking good, man. Welcome to the second virtual Joe Martin stage race. You guys did one earlier with the Echelon Racing League over on Zwift, sort of one of the pilot events of the series or of the season. Sounds like it went pretty well. Tell me why you guys are doing the virtual Joe Martin stage race this year.
Well, I mean, I think Eric and his team really did a great job of just doing a placeholder last year, right? I mean, it was all about keeping cycling top of mind, working with the sponsors and working with some of the, the major races in the country. And in the off season, they really upped their game, starting to work with RGT now. And we just believe it's the next step in marketing the races, the teams, and certainly the location.
Next step in continuing a lot of these historic races. Joe Martin Stage Race, certainly one of those. We talk about the amazing history with this race, Bruce, but if you would, just give us a quick overview of sort of where this race came from, where it got the name Joe Martin Stage Race, and how long this thing's been going on.
Well, I love to say this. It's the longest continually held stage race in the country. And certainly I didn't start it. Joe Martin actually started it, along with Nancy Martin. You'll hear an interview later on in the weekend, so I'm excited to hear from Nancy. And it was called the Fayetteville Spring Classic. 1978, doing a stage race in Fayetteville, Arkansas was, was pretty much out there, right? I mean, Joe was a Cat 1 racer, but at the same time he wanted to do a stage race on the road racing foot. And unfortunately, Joe passed away of leukemia in 1989. The local community renamed the race after him. And then I came along in 2003 and decided to do race production for a living. Put the Joe Martin Stage Race on the national calendar, and now we're here 18 years later. It's crazy.
Sounds like this Devil's Den time trial course is almost as historic as the race. I mean, you can't have the Joe Martin Stage Race without the Devil's Den TT.
Yeah, and so Joe, pretty amazing that he knew exactly what he wanted out of this. He wanted very hard stages and a true test. And so what about an uphill time trial? And for many years, people wanted to go up the switchbacks, but we didn't change it until just a few years later. So we used to go up the other side, and Frankie remembers that. I know Phil does. And now we're going up the switchbacks, and it's a beautiful setting down there. Definitely remote, as you say. We drop down in there and we get shut off from the world. But it's a great Arkansas State Park that highlights what we have. Arkansas is known as the natural state, and Devil's Den certainly kicks it off for the week, generally speaking.
Phil was talking about how tough it is to put on a race out there in the remote area that it is, finding parking, finding resources, all that stuff. But somehow, All Sports Productions pulls it off.
Hey, we have a great team, and the park has embraced us forever. In fact, you'll probably hear a little bit later on. It's the oldest mountain bike race in Arkansas. Started in Devil's Den by the same promoter who's assistant park ranger there. And so they go all in to help us out. And it's kind of interesting, but once you get down there, it's very peaceful. And when the gun goes off and that rider is finally started, we get to rest for just a little bit before we come back into the real world.
All right, we're going to let you rest a little bit while we handle the race directing here for the virtual Joe Martin Stage Race here. For the first time, you get to kick back and just watch. Turn your radio off, tune out, drop out, and just enjoy some racing for once, Bruce. That's Bruce Dunn, race director at the Joe Martin Stage Race. We are getting intermediate times in. We just saw Bruce Bird set the fastest intermediate time with a 5:09. Adam Schwent in second, about halfway through with the 5:12, and Steve Vogel with the 5:16. We're going to see how they finished up as we calculate their finish times here as well. Meanwhile, watching some new racers joining us this week. This is Kerry Werner, the new addition to the Project Echelon team here, Frankie, wrapping up his, gravel adventure mountain bike cyclocross season and joining Project Echelon for some virtual racing here.
Yeah, wrapping things up, the 29-year-old, the pro, cross rider for Kona. He started in mountain biking and been just excelling. He's been a Pan American champion in cyclocross, and so coming on over to Insured to be able to do the virtual race. And I'm pretty sure this is one of his first virtual races that he's doing on the RGT platform. And so it's going to be new for him, but he's a strong all-arounder type rider, so should be able to do very well in the time trial.
Yeah, I think he did his first or one of his first RGT races last weekend with the amateur Joe Martin stage race, giving it a try. It was eye-opening, let's say, for Kerry Warner at the least. So he is starting to get on that learning curve and starting to figure out how to play the game here on the platform. All right, Bird, Schwent, and Vogel still sitting in the top 3 for intermediate splits. This is Ryan Knapp out on course now. Kevin Bouchard-Hall sitting with the 4th fastest intermediate split. He could have a good split here as well. And then Hayden Warner with the 5th fastest split.
Once again, and Phil, you're going to maybe see this also, is that it's going to be interesting to see these intermediate splits, who is able to pace themselves properly to be able to have something to be able to go once it eases off a little bit. I mean, it's good to get the intermediate split time, but if you blow yourself up and you can't keep rolling it, you could end up losing a lot of time trying to get to the finish line. And I think that's something similar that you've seen, Phil, in the real life Devil's Den time trial.
Yeah, I want to show you guys these times because this is amazing to me. This is last year's in real life results. 0.6 seconds between Piccoli and Bassett on the finish line over a 9-minute and 17-second ride. Phil, this is a close course.
Like I said, the switchbacks are where you could, just the lines that you take and technique are worth a lot in such a close finish. And it's so short, so there's not a lot of time to lose or gain.
Yeah, Frankie, most of these times are pretty close together. I mean, even top 5 are inside 20 seconds there.
Yeah, and I think we're going to see the exact same thing in the virtual world. I mean, if we look at the Euro guys that did the time trial earlier, I mean, Thomas had that 8:51, which is the target for everybody trying to beat that. Charlie Beek from Great Britain was only 10 seconds back. Alec Jones, 19 seconds back. And I think those time gaps are going to be even closer here as we have a great look at John Cooper from XXX Athletico, pretty much just going flat out, trying to be able to get up the steeper portions of the climb right now.
Yeah, that is our women's leader, Jackie Godby there. She was giving him some advice earlier as kind of helping him pace the effort, I think, is the biggest thing that Godby is able to do for Cooper here. So if that is a familiar view, that's because you're going to be seeing that exact same angle in our women's race when Jackie Godby takes to the start line.
Yeah, Godby and Cooper out of Chicago, as Cooper, he had a good ride earlier because he won the Borrego Springs race. And so that was one of the very first Echelon Racing League series that we did. So Cooper, he's on the flatter portion right now, trying to be able to make his way towards the finish line. And again, all these guys are going to know that 8:51 is kind of sitting out there. Who's going to be able to get it? Now, this guy, you want to talk about a constant in the Echelon Racing League. That's Charlie Velez. He's been doing a super job at every single race.
Yeah, Velez is a rider that's really able to bury himself better than anyone else. Almost like virtual racing was tailor-made for virtual racing. This guy has really excelled in the transition. He started as a road rider. He was a traditional bike racer, I guess, quote unquote, and then came to virtual racing. But Velez has been super impressive. Just the way that he's able to suffer out there, Frankie. He's obviously all over the bike. He could maybe improve the form out on the road, but he's got that killer instinct that you need to be a good bike racer.
Well, if you just go back a couple years ago, he was a Category 2, so he's been moving up the rankings pretty good, and I think that a lot of that's because of the effort and the heart that he puts into it. He's been 3rd at the Junior National Road Race, and so Charlie Velez, obviously a big passion for cycling, and that's coming through with watching the way he races now as we see Uberti living, he's a Michigander. Like I mentioned, that aerodynamic engineer working for GM. He was living in Hamtramck, which is just outside of Detroit, and has recently moved to where he's living in Brighton. And that's kind of where he goes off and does a lot of his road riding, cross riding, still very active in riding throughout the winter time. And so Uberti's going to be pretty motivated, especially for First Internet Bank, to be able to do well here.
Yeah, few of the First Internet Bank riders joining the Echelon Racing League here over the last couple races. Nice to have them bring a little talent to the men's field here. This is a squad that we see all over the country, Frankie. These guys are omnipresent on the American crit scene. Well, American road race scene as well. We should, can't discount guys like Stephen Bassett. Got his break on that First Internet team.
Yeah, and this was a huge win for Stephen Bassett, taking the overall of Joe Martin. And Phil, you must have seen, last year, a lot of people weren't expecting First Internet Bank, or in 2019 for First Internet Bank to be able to win the overall, but that team really somehow pulled it together. Pretty surprised in the intermediate time. Sorry, I was going to say intermediate time with Bruce Bird, right? And it's amazing. A 5:09 was at intermediate time. I mean, he's one of the oldest riders in the race at 52 years old. And we saw him do an incredible ride. I think it was at Sunset where he went off and was like attacking like mad. And they only reeled him in just at the end. And so Bruce Bird right now with a good time as we move over to the Canadian Watson that's putting out about 300 watts, trying to be able to bring back Velez. Now, I would be surprised if Watson is able to catch up to Velez, but if he does, this would be an indication that Watson's really flying out there.
Back to Chris Huberti. I would not be surprised to see Huberti come in with a good intermediate split and then end up inside the top 10 overall. Although Velez as well, this guy would be great for a short effort like they need out there today. Phil, this course looks like it might get a little bit easier at the top from what I looked at the map. It seems like you kind of get up on that ridge line. Does it widen out there at all, or is it still pretty narrow all the way through?
A little bit, and the trees clear out a little bit as you're in some property from residents that live along the course. So it does feel wider for sure. And then there's just a false little downhill to get a little momentum. But if you put out the energy, it's still hard.
Phil, I was talking about First Internet Bank with Stephen Bassett taking that win in 2019. Caught a lot of guys by surprise, and I think, over the following days, that must have turned out to be a pretty good battle to try to dethrone that team.
Amateur race. They worked really hard and put in some time, so they weren't necessarily an overnight success. And I'm sure they would agree with that. They put in some time, but it definitely was not a big marquee name team that you see across the country come and show well in Joe Martin.
Yeah, I would call them underrated for the season, or for the last few years, I guess you got to say. Although Stephen Bassett is probably the perfect example of an underrated rider that just needed the break, right? Just needed a chance to get noticed. Feel bad that he had such a big breakthrough coming into 2021. I mean, that was a guy who was on the cusp of greatness. We saw it at races like Joe Martin. I mean, this guy was pro Conti level.
Look at Charlie Velez
burying himself. Yeah.
He's been out of the saddle the whole time. I think he's out of the saddle even on the flat sections.
That's what it takes to do well in virtual racing here. And Velez hits the line, cooked, in, and done. Frank, you know this feeling. There is nothing in the world like it.
Oh. Yeah, especially after you've had like a couple weeks off and then you got to do an effort like that. I mean, you want to talk about lung burn and leg burn. That's exactly what Charlie Velez is feeling right now. Just draped over his bike, and this is where you would fall to the ground after the time trial finish. But luckily, these guys, the bikes are stationary, so they have the balance underneath them. Now we go back to Larson, who's out on course. So Bruce Bird still with that fastest intermediate time, waiting to see if anybody can upset him. Waiting to also get some finish times to be able to see if anybody's been able to take out Ben Thomas, who has that 8:51. I noticed earlier also with the earlier start time for the Europeans, which makes sense. I mean, it's not fair for them to be off the race, at 12 o'clock or 1 in the morning. There were a good amount of Americans also, or Canadians, North Americans, let's call it, that raced there already earlier too. And I was thinking about that. It's like you could race at 6 p.m. at night, or you could race earlier in the day. And actually, I think that's the smart decision is to be able to pull off racing earlier in the day, because then you're going to get a longer time to recover in order to get ready for what's going to be an extremely hard road race coming up tomorrow. And so saw a lot of North American riders, U.S. and Canadian, that rode earlier today in that early time window for the time trial that was available to them.
Yeah, good point. I saw a few Americans took advantage of it. I think Zach Nair was in that early wave as well, but that's a good point. Get a little bit more time of recovery in between this effort and the next one tomorrow with I think, noon start time Eastern for the guys tomorrow. So, yeah, you get the difference between, 12 hours and 16 hours, let's say, of rest in between efforts. Frankie, it's not a long effort, but even a 9-minute time trial like this is enough to really put the hurt in the legs that you'll be feeling it the next day if you don't recover enough.
I totally agree. And, we've talked, Jackie Godby talked about it. It's still for her like a 2.5-hour day because of the warm up, because of the, the intensity of the race, but more importantly is the cool down of riding for 30 or 40 minutes trying to spin the legs out. Not everybody's got a soigneur sitting at home to be able for them to put their legs up and be able to get a massage, as we see Larson now come across the finish line. And so, or actually still out on course, excuse me. But yeah, that recovery extremely important. And so these riders are going to have to do a pretty good cool down. And yeah, if you can get an extra 6 hours to be able to get your legs feeling better before a big road race, I think everybody would take that.
It's like Smith rolling past Wilson here as they go past their halfway mark.
Hey, Phil, I got a question for you. That on the switchbacks of Devil's Den and going up, I mean, obviously in the virtual world, everybody's on road bikes. But when you're out there and, I remember when I was a team director, some guys would ride time trial bikes, some guys would ride road bikes. But when you were out there in the last couple of years in 2019, what generally is the selection and what kind of wheels would they pick for the Devil's Den in real life?
But really more light than aero, I would say.
Just right there, Hunter Wilson, the 20-year-old, he's a young rider racing for Team California, trying to be able to bring back Smith before the finish line. Team California with about 4 or 5 riders in this race, many of them all part of a development program, some of them coming from Team Swift out of California and other ones on Team California for a couple years. You can see all the riders that have finished up on the side of the road right there. Still trying to track down Bruce Bird with that split of 5:09. He seems to be the one in the lead. And haven't got any finish times yet. Going to wait to be able to see if we can get some of that up to be able to get an idea of maybe if the Europeans have done a kind of a better time than the other riders. But
well, here you go. Charlie Velez turning in the fastest time of our second wave of starters with an 8:55.9. Bird ends up second place after turning in the fastest split at 16 seconds down. Then Hayden Werner in third place for the Above and Beyond Cancer, presented by Bike World team, at 26 seconds down. I got to be honest, Frankie, these are bigger gaps than I thought we were going to see. I was thinking we were going to see 2, 3, 4, 5 seconds, but 16, 26, 28 seconds. Nice ride for Charlie Velez. Got a commanding fastest time for this set of rides.
Oh, fantastic. And that puts him only 4 seconds down on Ben Thomas. And so he's right there for the overall to be able to fight for that general classification. More importantly, super impressive. Look at the watts per kilogram, 6.52. I mean, that is massive. And a great ride by Bruce Bird from draft, 16 seconds back. And so a lot of these riders, again, feeling that lung burn, And maybe, it's a hard, intense effort trying to be able to handle a time trial like this, but a lot of the guys I'm sure are going to be happy to be able to get the virtual Joe Martin underway.
All right, last riders on their way in right now as we get ready for the pro women to take off from the starting line. We're going to take a short break here from the virtual Joe Martin stage race, and we'll be right back with more live racing.
The world is changing.
I'm looking to do things better.
To improve.
Just because it's always been that way doesn't mean it's right.
I embrace change.
I seek adventure and discovery.
I explore and explore.
To know the unknown.
Even in the toughest moments, we ride together.
Even in the moments when we're at our limits.
We support each other. It's time to move up a level.
And push that little bit harder.
Changes we make now will make the future better for all.
The efforts we put in today will pay dividends tomorrow.
We all have the power to up the game.
To build something better.
It's not time to play. It's time to get real.
It's time to be a game changer.
As an athlete, getting marginally better is one thing. Getting exponentially better puts you in a whole new ballgame. Biomoto uses a proprietary digital process to capture movement at 200 frames per second and 70 sensors per foot to measure ground-based forces, resulting in advanced motion analysis that's up to 10 times more accurate than orthotics. It's the data generated by this process that allows Biomoto to construct custom insoles that make athletes faster, stronger, and more stable, and result in an unprecedented 95% success rate.
The 2020 Project Echelon Virtual Joe Martin Stage Race is brought to you by Biomoto USA. Visit a location in Wisconsin or Colorado to find the motor in you. By Project Echelon, veterans nonprofit organization that educates, equips, and empowers veterans through physical activity. By Normatec, move better and enhance your recovery with HyperIce. And by Nations, enhancing the reach of esports, including the Echelon Racing League. Beautiful look at some of the scenes in Devil's Den State Park, including great mountain biking trails, plenty of riding, and of course some beautiful scenery as well. We were talking about some of the history with the CCC. We'll learn a little bit more about Devil's Den State Park.
Hello and welcome to Devil's Den State Park. My name is Mistina and I'm one of the park interpreters here at the park. Today I'd like to invite you all on a virtual hike through the legacy of the CCC. We will spend about 10 minutes virtually exploring the park's CCC Interpretive Trail to discover some of the most important historical resources here at Devil's Den State Park, work done by the CCC. Devil's Den State Park is a special place set aside to protect and preserve the cultural resources, like our CCC history, of this unique Ozark Valley in northwest Arkansas. So I've mentioned CCC a couple of times. Can you guess what CCC stands for? If you guess CCC stands for Civilian Conservation Corps, you were right. Today's hike will take us through the main CCC camp where 200 young men stayed while they were building our park. As we walk along the footsteps of the CCC, we become part of the park's legacy. Let us now explore that legacy. Devil's Den State Park would not be the park that we enjoy today if it weren't for the CCC's hard work and sacrifice. The Civilian Conservation Corps was formed by Franklin Roosevelt in the 1930s Great Depression era as part of his New Deal project. He formed the CCC for two main reasons. One reason was to give young men work during these hard times so they could support their families. The second reason was to build up these conservation areas like state parks and national parks. The type of work that the CCC boys did while building the parks was building the trails, such as our Devil's Den Trail, Lake Trail, and the Yellow Rock Trail. They also built the roads into the park so people could come down and enjoy this beautiful place. They planted trees and built recreation facilities like our cabins. We will actually get to see one of our cabins today here in just a few minutes. It was hard work building the park. Those of you that live in Arkansas or live in the surrounding states, you know how hot it can get here in the summertime. You also know how cold it can get here in the wintertime. Now, imagine being a CCC worker working in these outside conditions, the heat of the summer, the cold of the winter, doing this for $1 a day. Yes, just $1 a day. That's how much they were paid. I'm guessing most of you make more than $1 a day in your weekly allowance or paychecks, so $1 doesn't seem like a lot of money to us. But it was a lot of money back then, especially during the Great Depression era when there weren't a lot of jobs, not a lot of ways to support your family and to put food on the table. So the CCC was a good project to bring America out of the Great Depression era. All of our young men working in the CCC were aged 18 to 25 years old, and they were unmarried. At the end of the month, a CCC worker was paid his $30 paycheck, but $25 was sent home to his family. That's how a lot of families were supported. If they had a son or an older brother working in the CCC, their family was being supported. The extra $5 the CCC worker got to keep for himself. He usually would save it up because he was staying here and living in the CCC camp. He didn't need much. He was well taken care of. He was fed 3 meals a day. He got to stay in barracks. They gave him work uniforms and even 2 pairs of shoes. So life was pretty great here, despite the hard work that they were doing. Let's walk further down the trail to see where these young men lived and worked and talk about some of their daily routines. Similar to a family, the Parks CCC Company 3795 spent daily routines together in this main camp area. Here you'll see a foundation. This is one of our most intact foundations left behind from the CCC camp here in the park. This was the kitchen foundation. This is where all their meals were prepared. As I said earlier, they were fed 3 meals a day. And I don't mean just cereal for breakfast. It was 3 big meals a day. They were really well taken care of while they were living here in the CCC camp. What does every good kitchen need? Think about what your kitchen has in it. Well, you probably said oven, sink, plates, dishes, things like that. You probably also said a refrigerator. Most of you will have a refrigerator in your kitchen. Well, back in the 1930s, we didn't quite have the refrigerators that we have today. Instead, the CCC camp had a root cellar. You can see the root cellar here on the CCC Interpretive Trail. This is where they kept their food, like fruit, vegetables, and meat. Everything in this camp was kind of close together. It was really accessible and convenient. We have the kitchen here, we had the root cellar, and just down the trail is the latrine or the bathhouse foundation. It's our second most intact foundation that we have here in the camp left behind today. The bathhouse was big enough to accommodate the 200 young men working in this park. You may not think that we had indoor plumbing in the 1930s, but since this was a federally operated camp, of course they had nicer things. So yes, they had indoor plumbing here in the park, in the latrine. So they were able to take hot showers and they were able to have flush toilets. It was kind of nice. Let's walk further down the trail and I will show you one of the cabins that they built. The CCC built structures you see in the park were made of natural materials found in the area and were built to last lifetimes. This is cabin 17 behind me. You'll notice that the foundation of the cabin was built using the native sandstone from this area, and the wood siding was made of wood from this area. The CCC built their structures in the rustic style of architecture, also called parkitecture, so that they look like they belong to the natural landscape. They blend into the natural landscape. Doesn't it look like Cabin 17 belongs here in nature? All of our cabins that were built by the CCC in the 1930s here in the park are unique in their own way. They have different floor plans, they're different sizes. Cabin 17 is what we call a studio cabin, which means everything is in one room. It's one of our smaller cabins, but the cabin is special because this was actually the headquarters for the CCC camp here in the 1930s. Today we've explored the main camp area where the CCC lived while building our beautiful park. I'd like to encourage all of you to seek out more information about the CCC or experience CCC structures firsthand. There is a really great documentary I recommend that you watch. It's a PBS video about the American experience and the CCC work done in the entire nation. It really goes into detail about the young men in the 1930s and the hardships they went through to build our country back up from the Great Depression. You can also find out more information about the CCC work done at Devil's Den by contacting us. Our contact information is found on the Arkansas State Parks website. I also encourage you to look for CCC built structures in your community, or visit Devil's Den State Park when you're able to experience the park's CCC structures for yourself. As you walk along the footsteps of the CCC, you become part of the park's legacy. Thank you for participating in today's hike through the legacy of the CCC and virtually visiting Devil's Den State Park.
All right, we are out here, Camino Escuela in Tucson, Arizona, for the first ever Camino Escuela Hill Climb Championships. Competitors here. Sean is going to be rocking the e-bike, the new Subito e-bike, weighing in at like 30 pounds, an additional, I don't know what that does, 200 watts. Heather, all natural. For you, girl, I can reach the stars. The course, I mapped it out earlier. It's about 1.3 kilometers. I think it gains about 30 to 40 meters. That's around 100 feet, and it's just short of a mile. Girl, I can reach the stars. Yo. Oh, the nights when you couldn't sleep, I was there carrying what you're on. Shooting at the demons, see your dreams, making them more fun. Yeah. And if you wanna run away from the best you've done, yeah, I'll be there to save the day. I'll be your rising sun.
Have you ever had a feeling that, like, there's no hope anymore? And then someone walks in your life and just light it up? Or more like screw it up again? Well, I guess this is the main reason why I'm writing this song. I heard you calling, I saw your sleepless face and I felt hard. I guess I'm falling for you, girl, I can reach the stars. Now. Oh, the nights we couldn't sleep, I was there carrying what you're on. Shooting at the demons, see your dreams, making them more fun. Yeah. And if you wanna run away from the best you've done, yeah, I'll be there to save the day. I'll be your rising sun.
All right, that just happened.
Yeah, I'm the champ. That was crazy. I mean, I hit my button and she had no chance.
I thought I was dropping you. And you were just messing
I
with
was stretching, getting ready for my effort. I did a little bit of this, one of these, and then I just went.
We thought you were like getting dropped too.
This is how it feels. I feel so powerful right now.
My name is Dr. Alan Lim. I'm an exercise physiologist, and I've spent most of my career working with professional cyclists. For years, I've been getting riders to ride on static trainers that don't move. But now, with the Infinity technology by Ceres on the MP1 platform, you have fore-aft movement as well as side-to-side movement that ultimately greatly enhances comfort. Every single contact point can move in a more natural way, and over the long haul, what that means is you don't get beat up by your static trainer. With just that little bit of motion, you start to replicate what you feel in the outdoors, and that changes the entire experience. I think that one of the big reasons for that is that we're naturally tuned to want to move. Our vestibular system, when it's activated, ends up, creating, I think, a sense of harmony or joy that just isn't the same when you're not able to move. It's like the difference between a rocking chair versus a static chair. And a lot of it, I think, is about expectation, because when you get it on a bicycle, you expect it to move. And so when you get on the MP1 platform with the Infinity technology, you get that same level of movement. 6 degrees side to side, 9.5 inches fore and aft. And what that does is it creates an experience that is just so much more enjoyable, so much more fun than being on a static trainer. When you look at the design of the MP1 platform, it's not just designed for the H3 trainer by Ceres. It's also designed to be compatible with almost every new smart trainer currently on the market. So if you don't own the H3, but you have your own trainer at home, odds are this will be compatible with the MP1. Another unique feature of the Infinity technology on the Ceres MP1 platform is that it's best in class. You have 6 degrees of side-to-side motion and 9.5 inches of fore-aft motion. That's movement that specifically replicates what you feel outdoors, and there's no other competitor on the market that can simulate that type of movement. It's certainly not the kind of movement that you can get by just putting tennis balls under your trainer. Cycling isn't just about your legs and your lungs. It's also about being able to handle the bicycle, and that takes a lot of control in both your core as well as all of these small stabilizer muscles. On an indoor trainer that is static, you're just not getting any of that specificity. But with the Infinity technology built into the MP1 platform, you are able to use and have to use all of those stabilizers to control the bicycle. The net effect is that not only do you get a workout for your legs and your lungs, but you also get a workout for your core. The Infinity technology built into the MP1 platform creates the best-in-class movement for any trainer system. You've got 6 degrees of side-to-side movement, 9.5 inches of fore-aft movement, and the net result is way more comfort, way more fun, the ability to use your core or stabilize your muscles, and you've got a platform that is compatible with most trainers.
Pro women getting ready to roll off the start line in the virtual Joe Martin stage race as we just wrapped up our pro men's individual time trial here for the Devil's Den State Park time trial. Pro women will be getting underway here in just a few minutes. Our first riders will leave the start house in 30-second intervals, so we should see those riders wrap up here fairly quickly as this field will crush this relatively short time trial course. Let's take a look at how our men ended up after wrapping up their race early. Actually, we'll go to series standings, I think. Yeah, there we go. So this is where things stand right now in our women's series with Jackie Godby leading the way. Frankie, this has been the story pretty much all week as we bring back in Frankie Andreu here, or pretty much all month, all year, I should say, watching Jackie Godby dominate here in the Echelon Racing League.
Yeah, she's been on fire, definitely showing a lot of strength. She likes riding from the front, on the front, setting things at about 4 watts per kilogram, and it's worked out for her with her taking about, I think 10 wins out of the 13 or 14 races. At Redlands, she did super, winning the time trial, winning Oak Glen, but we did see an upset when we got to Sunset Loop where Lauren Matson-Coe took over. So Lauren Matson-Coe trying to move up the rankings, but Krista Doble-Hickok has been doing a fantastic job trying to be able to battle against Jackie Godby, as you can see in short, presented by Pedal Power, starting to get a little bit more of a commanding lead over Velocity Vixen.
Yeah, riders like Chris Doble-Hickok, Jackie Godby, they're not racing with big teams here, so you don't really see their teams on the team list. Now, teams like Insured, presented by Pedal Power, the Velocity Vixen team, Amy D Foundation, those are squads that are bringing big teams, big rosters every week to the Echelon Racing League. So consistency is key in that battle for the team competition, in the battle for the team overall. And a lot of teams are trying to focus on that because it really shows your overall strength of the team. Frankie, it's tough to be consistent in virtual racing. Real life getting in the way, trying to make sure that you don't have any mechanicals or technicals out there. A lot can go wrong in virtual racing. So to be able to pull off a solid season of 8, 10, 12 races is an impressive run.
It's very impressive. And not only, dealing with, internet connections and things like that, but you have to remember a lot of these races, they're short. So they're super intense, and that intensity can catch up with you. It's like redlining every single time. And eventually the engine's going to quit. But Jackie Godby has been redlining, and she's been able to do it consistently and taking those wins. And that's what's going to be interesting for some of these other riders is the intensity of these races, how that's going to play out for them as we continue along in the series.
But we know Jackie Godby likes the long-distance time trials coming from a triathlon background. But the big question will be, how does she do on the short time trial course that they have today? As we take a look at our course profile presented by VeloViewer, we saw this in the men's race, somewhere around 9 minutes, the winning times here. But it's really all in the front end of this time trial, Frankie. It seems like the big times are made up in the first half of this course.
Well, that warm-up's critical, and they're going to shoot off the ramp at about 400 watts, and then you have to be able to time it out a little bit. It's steeper at the bottom part. There's a lot of switchbacks, so they're going to have to handle the turns. Then they got to kind of keep that momentum over the more gradual last mile leading in towards the finish. It's a little bit under 5 kilometers, about 2.97 miles. Maximum gradient 9.5%, average gradient 6%. And it's a tough climb. It's similar to Redlands, so a lot of these riders will know what that short time trial is like, finishing on a climb. But this one, I don't really think there's a whole lot of pacing. It really is just going as hard as you can.
Phil, it seems like this is an all-or-nothing time trial, but they have to be careful to make sure that they save enough for the next 2 days of racing at the Joe Martin stage race. Very similar to real life over the 4 days of racing in real life.
That is for sure. The time trial definitely sets the tone, but being able to think the long game is definitely important.
But we're going to see who recovers well after the day of racing today as, again, some riders at, I don't want to say an advantage, but a different start time because those European riders did have the opportunity to take their European start slot, which is about noon, about 12 o'clock Eastern time here in the United States. So some riders did take advantage of that as well, but we'll see. We'll see how it all shakes out and see if it pays off to get that little bit of extra rest. Frankie, we were talking about the starts. I want to go back to this because this is a huge part of racing on RGT, and I think probably one of the biggest differences between real-life racing and virtual racing here on the platform, the importance of ramping up your power to get to the start. It's one thing to leave a start house and try to go from 0 to 400 watts, but on RGT, you're basically starting at 400 watts when you leave the line.
Yeah, exactly. You know, you're not like pushing on the pedal, looking down, trying to clip your pedal in, trying to follow a wheel, trying not to bump into somebody. RGT, it's a wind up, and you have to be wound up in order to be able to launch off that start line. And so a lot of times, 5 seconds to go, you'll see the riders. They'll all be out of the saddle. They'll be in a bigger gear than normal, trying to wind it up to get the watts so that when that clock hits 0, really you're catapulted off the line to be able to make sure you're in the front group, or in this case, getting a good start for your time trial.
Phil, in real life, are things as close as they've been here on RGT? I mean, I would imagine you're seeing a lot of riders coming into contact in real life. Is there a lot of passing? Do they do 30-second intervals? What's it like in real life?
Yeah, I believe it's 30-second intervals. It's pretty close, especially with the switchbacks. I think riders have to time their effort if they're going faster than someone they're catching, and how to maneuver that and not really go out of their line through the switchbacks in the early part of the course.
Yeah, you got to know the course and know yourself as well, Frankie. Recon on this course, I mean, is recon going to save you on a day like today, or is that just the difference between an 802 and an 803 on a day like this?
I would guess it'd be a little bit more than that. I think knowing the course of like the steeper portions on the bottom part and the switchbacks, and then how it kind of levels off a little bit to be able to wind it up towards that finish line, that's going to play a big factor. And so any of the riders that might have raced in the amateur version, or have actually, this course has been up on RGT for a while, they could have previewed it. We'll be able to have a good advantage to be able to do well today.
I love looking at the profile here. We're seeing some of our bots leave the starting line, which means we're going to have our first riders out of the pen here very shortly. It pretty much goes uphill immediately, Phil. As soon as you leave the start line here, you're climbing. I mean, you're basically climbing onto a 3-4% grade here on RGT. So you're really, I think the easiest part, I guess, is probably at the top, the last kilometer or so, half kilometer.
It is, but you've put so much energy in the start and getting going, so you can't recover at the top. It's still full out, even though it levels off and winds it up a little bit to the final dig to the line.
Yeah, of course, they put the easiest part at the end when you're most tired. No rest for the wicked, as they say. So getting a good look at some of our riders in the room. You see a lot of them on the phone, a lot of conversation going on with their teams. I've been watching a lot of these riders communicate in the run-up to the ride, looking for a little bit of intel maybe from some of their male team counterparts that went before them on, where the really hard parts of the course is. Frankie, just like in real life, you can look at the profile all you want, but until you get out there and ride it, you don't really know a course. So I think the riders that are getting the chance to see this for the first time under race conditions might be in for a big shock.
Yeah, and one thing to consider also is just in real life, going out and riding the course to preview it, training is very different than racing it, as we see Michelle Henry that has just taken off. And so for a lot of these riders, it's going to be different on how they handle this, trying to race up this climb compared to training it. Michelle Henry with Insured, presented by Pedal Power. She's going to be looking to try to beat that time from the European riders that went off a little bit earlier at noon. Stephanie Seidlich was the best time earlier with a 10 minute and 15 seconds. So that's what they're going to be looking at. So Seidlich had 10 minutes and 15 seconds. Lauren Matson-Co went off earlier. She was only 4 seconds behind that. And then Crystal Doble-Hickok was 27 seconds behind that. So going to be looking at, got to put in about 5.5 to 5.9 watts per kilogram. And right now, Michelle Henry's, sitting right at about 260 on the lower portions of this course.
I want to bring Bruce Dunn back in. We've been talking about the importance of reconning this course for RGT, but I imagine we're going to see a lot more riders using this course for their recon for the in-real-life race. Bruce, they're going to be able to ride this pretty much year-round. This course is going to live on for eternity in RGT. Is that correct? I think we might have lost Bruce. A stoic face, but not that stoic. Yeah, luckily he froze on a good look.
Exactly. You look pretty good there. You could see just a minute ago, Michelle Henry was on that 10% grade, trying to put in a big effort to be able to get up there. Michelle Henry out of Denver. As we go over here to Danny Monahan from the MED Foundation.
Good look here, hovering over the shoulder of Monahan. You can see some of the data that the riders are seeing up in the top right of your screen. That is showing Monahan's current time. You can also see sort of the elevation profile in the middle of that graphic, and then the time ridden and some speed information as well. The list to the left is showing the current riders on course. It's not going to do as much good on a day like today because it's based on their position out on course, and then it also shows us the distance to the next riders in front of them. So you can see about 100 meters between most riders, somewhere around there, but we don't have the time splits in there. So, and again, it's a random start based on when the riders arrive, but it does show you who we're looking at, who we're following, and a little bit about them. You can see the current wattage that they're doing to the right of their name, along with their team jersey and their nationality over to the left of the name.
Yeah, and the most important part, I think, is the slope, where you see that changing, 6, 8, 12, 14. You can see the grade. That way you can be able to kind of gauge when you have to get out of the saddle and put down the power. As right now, 240, 250 watts, Claudia Ferreira doing a fantastic job. And she's been a trooper in all of these other races, just hanging in there and battling tough at every single race, the 28-year-old racing for the MED Foundation.
This is Ferreira on your screen now with the dual fan setup. Rolling by one of our bots out on course. You can see the power zone that they're in, that yellow line underneath her name to her left. That shows that she's in the yellow power zone. You just saw it dip to green. It's basically a sliding scale from green to red based on how intense the riders are going. That is based on what's called their FTP, the functional threshold power. But that's a bunch of math that only bike nerds care about. So you just need to know that the colors indicate how hard or how tough they're pedaling out there.
Yeah, and a lot of that's figured out from that. Sorry, a lot of that's figured out, Brad, from that eBio passport also, with trying to be able to make this as level a playing field as possible, with having to be able to video themselves on the scale with their weight, and then that's a way of figuring out their functional threshold power to be able to make sure that their trainers also are calibrated correctly as we go over here to Mason that's out on course.
Yeah, there's some technical elements that go into virtual racing, including the verification. Frankie was talking about the eBio passport program that Echelon Racing League is using to basically track the riders and make sure that no results are abnormal out there. It sort of gives us a better picture overall of where everyone stands each week. Good look at Mason here in her pain cave. Yeah.
I like to see Britt Mason in the red. You could see her little, the orange and yellows. She was definitely in the red. So Britt Mason doing a fantastic job going out hard on the lower portions of this slope. Nice to be able to see her putting in this good of an effort.
Back to Esteboville or Team Infinite.
Esteboville actually is a former hockey player that has taken up cycling. Had a good ride earlier in some of the Echelon Racing League races. Right now, 277 watts. You can see that in the upper left-hand corner. So that's 5.3 watts per kilogram, and that's good for her. If we want to go look at Stephanie Sidlick, who's right now, from the European riders that raced earlier with that 10-minute and 15-second time, which everybody is chasing, she did 5.97 watts per kilogram, but just behind her, Lauren Matson-Coe was right at 5.4 watts per kilogram. So somebody that can hold right around 5.4 to 5.5 watts per kilogram is definitely going to end up there in the results.
Yeah, I'm amazed at some of the numbers that we're seeing here on the uphill time trial and some of the times, how closely they mimic some of the best riders in the country. I mean, the men's race, we saw names like Stephen Bassett, James Piccoli on that list, and the times of guys like Ben Thomas weren't far off, so it's going to be really interesting. I've been really looking forward to hoping to see some crossover here between the virtual world and the real world. I want to bring Bruce Dunn back in, race director of the Joe Martin Stage Race. Bruce, we were just talking about how amazing it is to see how closely these riders line up. I certainly hope that we're going to get to see these riders in real life in 2021. I understand we're going to be hearing about some new dates coming up this weekend. You guys are going to be making that big announcement this Sunday.
Yeah, we're going to make it this Sunday, so I'm pretty excited about that. We've been working hard, really a year out, working with the race directors of the other, the races on the PRT, the UCI calendar. Certainly, probably talked to the teams more in the last year than we have in the last 18 years. And I think we do have the date. So Sunday, let's just go ahead and put the time. How about between the men's and the women's race on Sunday? Let's make that announcement.
I like it. We'll make the announcement then. We're dropping all kinds of news on the show here because we're also going to be talking about some new Cross Worlds news. We're going to be talking about the course there. I know we're going to have Brooke Watts joining us on the show to talk a little bit about Cross Worlds and Fayetteville Cross as well. So all kinds of good bike racing stuff going on here at the virtual Joe Martin Stage Race. It's a new era that we're making these announcements on these virtual shows. But Bruce, that's what it's about in 2021. You guys, I understand, have already had a few successful events already in your neck of the woods, working with your local health department, your cities, making sure that things are safe. But it sounds like we are slowly getting back to maybe having some real life bike races soon.
Yeah, I think, the state of Arkansas has 3 million people, and, some cities have 3 million people. And so we were allowed to have 7 in-person events last year. They weren't pack racing events. They were trail runs, gravel rides, Grand Fondo rides, all of them under 500 people. And so you could socially distance very easily. It was good to get out. At the same time, a race like Joe Martin Stage Race, not only the pack racing, but more the spectating last year. This year, we've been in communication already. We already have permits in place. And so it's exciting because our health department actually watched the Tour de France last year. And so they know exactly what the teams do, how insulated they are, and they have a high degree of confidence when we announce this date on Sunday that they're supportive of us having the Joe Martin Stage Race in person, and I'm very excited about it because it'll be 44 years that we've had this race.
Wow, 44 years. Hard to believe. And, it's still going strong here, even after a crazy couple years or a crazy year over the last year here. Bruce, I'm going to let you kick back and enjoy a beer here because for every promoter, I think this is such a unique opportunity where you can just watch your race unfolding without having to do anything. So I hope you're enjoying the new format of virtual race directing.
Yep, that's why I wasn't there. I was definitely enjoying it, and so I was having fun on social media and listening to the great race. I tell you what, as a race director, it's really neat to see you commenting about it, seeing all the racers' experiences that have never done this, and excited about the work to come in the next years ahead.
Well, we're going to be seeing you soon in Fayetteville for the Joe Martin Stage Race. Bruce, thanks so much, and enjoy the rest of the racing here as we are getting down to our final riders leaving the start house here. Looks like we are down to just a handful of riders remaining to leave the start line. We'll get some intermediate start times or intermediate time checks here soon to get a better idea of where some of these riders are sitting. But Frankie, I think we have a pretty good idea of who the favorites in this one are going to be. We typically see a list of familiar characters when it comes to good time trial results.
Yeah, Godby's got to be at the top of that list. I talked about Lauren Matson-Coe and Krista Doble-Hickok already going off earlier at noon. And they put in pretty good times. Again, Matson-Coe was at 10 minutes and 19 seconds. The time that they're all shooting for is Stephanie Seidlich. That's the time they're trying to beat at 10 minutes and 15 seconds. So we've seen the strong riders, and they have been repeatedly been able to duplicate that, which has been super impressive week after week when the Echelon Racing Series has been taking place. But even though I was going to sit thinking about this, Devil's Den is a little bit off the beaten path. You talk about it being secluded, but part of Joe Martin Stage Race is being in Fayetteville and being downtown Fayetteville, which is a fantastic city, University of Arkansas, big college town, great places to eat, drink. So even though you come out here to, let's just call it the country, to be able to do some bike riding, and they have a ton of great mountain bike trails, it's nice going back into the town to be able to kind of relax and enjoy yourself in Fayetteville.
Yeah, sometimes that's the point, is to unplug, right? And Fayetteville's certainly a good place to do that, but you're never far from cell reception. You're never far from a good cocktail, never far from a good coffee shop, even if you're just outside of town. You can get away pretty quickly, get outside of town pretty quickly leaving Fayetteville. Wiseman into the red here. She works her way in. She's been a really impressive rider this season, Frankie, watching sort of part of our international contingent and talking about riders on that Amy D Foundation. A lot of new riders on that team as well, and we've seen some really good results from them this season. We saw early success from riders like Elena O'Mara, but it's a really great mission, the Amy D Foundation team, to really help guide those riders to the next level, give them the opportunity so that they can try and race at the highest level of the sport. And I would be surprised to see riders on this year's Amy D Foundation roster making their way to some pro-continental or world tour teams.
Well, they do a great job with kind of mixing and matching the experienced riders with the younger development riders. And so Eleanor Weissman, one of those more experienced riders, I talked 2019, she did a ton of races in 2019, over 53 races, which is a lot to be able to do. So she gets herself out there and does a ton of races, as right now we're seeing Burring out on course in the green. So Burring pacing herself as Chaffin, you can see the pace difference just flying right by her. Chaffin's doing 5.1 watts per kilogram, Burring doing 3.7 watts per kilogram, and that's the gap that opens up when you have that kind of watt differential.
Yeah, Chaffin flying on the way up that climb. She used the incline to her advantage. And meanwhile, here's Baring tapping out the tempo. Chaffin not far up the road. She kind of let the gap open up, but now looks like Baring maybe trying to throw a rope up and hold on as she sits in the comfortable yellow power zone here.
Yeah, Baring racing for Canyon Esports out of Boulder, Colorado. Just kind of, again, tapping out that tempo. And that's important because that steep part, you got to get out of the saddle to kind of keep the power down. But then once you get kind of to the more gradual part, you just got to keep those pedals turning over to be able to put in a good pace.
Velocity Vixen team with Bronna McGregor. Also going deep here, 9.4% incline. Sorry, just on one of the steepest parts of the course right here, Frankie.
Yeah, so it's a critical part of the course because every time it goes up, this is where you can gain the time. And McGregor coming out of New Zealand, 2021, she raced for the Liv cycling team, and she's actually a good time trialist. She was third in the New Zealand Time Trial Championship. So this should be right up her alley as we see these quick intermediate times.
Yeah, look at this. Eleanor Wiseman with a significant gap over Esteboville and Britt Mason in second and third for the intermediate split. 5:49 there for Wiseman over Boville, 6:16. So pretty commanding lead for Wiseman. But again, it's not how you start, it's how you finish. So she's got to have a good second half of the ride here as well. We'll see if she can hold on to that blistering early pace set. Also watch for the later riders moving in. We do have some men's results mixed in there. Sorry about that. Chris Navin in fourth place. But watch out for riders like Strelo. Chelsea Harris might be able to move up as well because you can absolutely have a stronger second half of this time trial than you did the first half.
Well, looking at those time splits, third, fourth, and fifth, we're all 1 second apart from each other. So first, she had a pretty good gap. Wiseman doing a fantastic job to be able to get that, to be able to have that first time split with a comfortable lead. But again, we had some other riders go off earlier, so that time to beat is 10 minutes and 15 seconds right now as we see McGregor and the New Zealander putting in a good ride right now. 5.1 watts per kilogram, so she's right in line with what she needs to do.
Yeah, so much of this is just trusting the recon that you did, sort of knowing the effort that you have to put in and just trusting the plan, making sure that you're executing what's best for you. It's easy to get caught up trying to chase a rider, follow a rider, try and ride their tempo, but if you understand where you are, you know your plan, just got to stick to it. That's sometimes easier said than done. Here's Christy Tracy. She will certainly be a pre-race favorite for a top 5 position in the time trial here today. One of our final riders to roll off here. By the way, you see the green jersey hanging behind Christy Tracy. That is the sprint winner's jersey from the Joe Martin stage race, which she won in the first virtual Joe Martin stage race earlier this year over on Zwift, part of the Echelon Racing League. She won the green jersey sprint competition there, so put that on display for this weekend's racing.
Pretty nice. I mean, you want to talk about a time trial specialist. I mean, Christy Tracy fits right into there. Hey, Phil, you know, you've actually announced Joe Martin stage race for a number of years. How many years have you announced Joe Martin stage race? And do any of them actually stand out, like one better than the other?
I've been doing it as long as Bruce Dunn, the race director, has been doing it. So it's 18 years now, I think. 19 if we count this year. So there are definitely different things that stand out, different occasions, but they're all special in their own way. We've had so many great riders, either past riders who've come from the Pro Tour and come back to Continental Racing, like you, Frankie, and participate in the race, coaching and riding. And then the women, it's just so incredible. The regional riders, the domestic riders taking on some of the internationals, whether South Americans or a few of the Europeans. It's just been, all of them stand out. It's hard to put it into words.
Yeah, it's one thing with Joe Martin, you know, being a UCI race, which is like, I'd say one of the very few that are left right now. They bring in a lot of the foreigners that be able to come in, like South Americans. And if, for example, the winner of your 2019 Devil's Den time trial was Andrea Ramirez, and she did a time of 10 minutes and 55 seconds. And so that was a strong, strong time that she did. And so, again, you know, Seidlich time of 10:15, and we saw on the men's side with Ben Thomas beating the in real lifetime also, but you got to take into account there's no wind, you don't have to battle with a headwind, you're not dealing with the heat or the cold, so there's a lot of factors go in why the virtual race is a little bit quicker time-wise than what you see in the real life world.
Yeah, being able to wake up in your own bed, make your own breakfast. You don't have to travel to the race. There's no early wake up. It's, there's a few differences, I guess, with virtual racing. But the wattages have lined up pretty well. We've been looking at some other races of riders that did the races in real life and then did the virtual racing as well with the Echelon Racing League. For the most part, Frankie, the power files are lining up pretty well, we're finding.
Yeah, it's incredible on how realistic the magic roads of RGT are. And so those power files are matching up when you're trying to do the exact same times. It's pretty impressive. One thing that's key here is these intermediate times. I mean, if I go back and look at the men, Velez, like I saw, he ended up second overall, did a great time. But like Warner, Henry Warner, he had a 7th intermediate time, but then he jumped up to 3rd place to finish overall. Whereas Schwint, who had a 2nd fastest intermediate time, he ended up dropping down to finish 4th. And so a lot of these intermediate times, even though, you know, you're going quick, you really is a bit about pacing yourself. Like Matt Main was 10th fastest intermediate time, and he ended up 6th in the race. And so got to take an eye on these intermediate times as Vi Nagayan, 5:45, right there, Wiseman. So what a ride by her.
Yeah, new fastest intermediate split for win there, just a second faster than Wiseman. Meanwhile, Tracy on her way up to the halfway point, and I think she's going to post a pretty fast time because she has Jackie Godby in her sights. We just saw Tracy on the other side of that orange Experience Fayetteville billboard here, so it's about 100 meters, something like that, between Godby and Tracy out here. 126 meters, you can see on the left-hand side of the screen right here. So Christy Tracy is going to have Jackie Godby in her sights, Frankie. This is huge because once you can see that bait dangling out in front of you, psychologically it makes it a lot easier to chase that rabbit down.
Oh yeah, Godby's going to be on full form, and you're going to see, you know, she's going to be in yellow at 9% grade right now as Godby's doing 5.7 watts per kilogram. And yeah, if she can see Tracy just in front of her, she's definitely going to start tracking her down. And what a boost for her confidence if she is able to track down Tracy, because honestly, Tracy is one of her biggest rivals in this virtual racing league.
Yeah, this is maybe the time trial that Christy Tracy has been waiting for to try to beat Jackie Godby in, because it's a little bit outside of Godby's wheelhouse, a little bit outside of Godby's comfort zone. Now, Christy Tracy is not a short-form rider either. I mean, she's an endurance rider at heart. That's where most of her background in riding is, in endurance riding and endurance racing. So we're looking at a couple long-range riders battling it out in a short-form attack here.
Look at Tracy right now, head down, giving it all. And you talk about long distance. Yeah, she's a 24-hour expert, national time trial champion in the 24-hour. And so right now, she loves riding in this position. This is her comfort position, which usually is kind of more difficult for many other riders. But coming out of that triathlon background, this is perfect for her. She's got her head down, trying to be able to hold off Jackie Godby from catching her. But more importantly, trying to keep those watts up and put in a super fast time to be able to catch that time of Stephanie Seidlich, who's the current fastest time at 10 minutes and 15 seconds.
You got to remember, we're watching V Win as well. Had the fastest intermediate split there, going just a second faster than Eleanor Wiseman. So there's a handful of riders in contention here at the top of the women's field, with Win, Wiseman, Tracy, and Godby turning in the 4 fastest intermediate splits. And they're all riding together here. This is perfect. We couldn't have asked for a better setup for these riders leaving the pen. We're going to see Godby finish first, Tracy behind her, and Win should be in front of both of those with her intermediate split here. So we're going to see some fast finish times coming into the line here very soon. You can see the riders just about to get to the peak of the climb here. You see the elevation profile in the top right corner of Christy Tracy's screen here. That is sort of the top of the ridge that they go across when they get through that narrow, windy section of the course profile that we saw a little over halfway through. That's where things tend to get a little faster. Like right here, Jackie Godby working her way down the small downhill section that Phil was telling us about earlier, Frankie.
Look at that, only 4 seconds difference between Win and Godby. So Win, I mean, if she doesn't crack, if she's able to hold this pace, this would be an unbelievable breakout ride for her. The rider out of Seattle, the 24-year-old, trying to be able to hold off Jackie Godby, who right now is flying down the road. Look at the speed, 70 kilometers per hour.
And Godby going through the 1 kilometer marker as she goes inside 1,000 meters to the line. Look how steady she is, Frankie. Just as I say that, she gets out of the saddle. But even into the last K, I mean, really not seeing a ton of movement on the bike for Jackie Godby.
No, she's got a great form. She knows how to turn over the gear, and that's one thing that we notice a little bit differently is she spins a little bit more. She turns the gear over a little bit quicker than what we see some of the other riders who might be sitting at about 80 RPMs. Godby will be 90 to 95, but just there you can see all red. Look underneath her name. She is pinned right now, redlining herself, trying to get to that finish line to put in a good time.
Behind her, Christy Tracy has just gone through 1 kilometer, so still holding on to that roughly 100-meter gap between Godby and Tracy. They're going to hit the line very close to each other, and I have a feeling those are going to be inside of our top 5 times on the day. So Godby, I think this is the most that we've seen Godby out of the saddle all season here, Frank. If you combined all the time we saw Godby out of the saddle, I don't know that it would even add up to the amount of time that she spent standing up today.
I would agree, and surprisingly, 250 meters to go. This is on the flatter section of the course. This isn't even the steeper section of the course, but she realizes she was down on time on Win, so she's trying to be able to bring that time back, and right now it's just a full sprint. Look at that, red, 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 all the way to the finish. Look at her stomach. She's breathing like mad. That's the first time I've really seen a big effort coming from Godby. Really, where you could tell, sometimes you can't tell if they're going flat out. That time you could tell she was going flat out. Now Christy Tracy in the red. Love seeing this. Look at that, 5.8 watts per kilogram. The power these women are putting out is ridiculous.
Godby just did a 10:03.4, so that is the time for Christy Tracy to beat here. She won't know that, so she's just got to go as deep as she can here, trying to go under 10:03. Tracy going to be one of our final riders to hit the line here. And that's going to be at 10:24 for Tracy. So she tacks on maybe a few more seconds than she wanted, and looks like Jackie Godby might hold on to this one. We'll wait for official results to get confirmation, but does not look like Tracy was able to best Godby's time out there today.
What an effort from all of these riders to be able to make sure they start off the Joe Martin time trial in a good position, and that's the key. You know, I mean, fine, you want to have a great time. Sure, you would love to be able to take victory, but there's so much racing left. It's super important to be able to put in a good effort, actually open up the legs so you're going to feel really good tomorrow for the road race after you do a good recovery. But more importantly is keeping the time gap small so that you have a chance to be able to do something later on. That's exactly what many of the women in the race did.
All right, so here is where things ended up with our second wave of riders. Jackie Godby doing a 10:03. Chrissy Tracy ends up in second place, 21 seconds down, doing 5.6 watts per kilogram. V Win held on for third place for the Insured, presented by Pedal Power Team, a new name in the top 5 here in the Echelon Racing League, at 24 seconds down on Godby. And then Eleanor Wiseman for the Amy D Foundation, ending up in fourth place with Bronwyn McGregor in fifth place, just ahead of her Velocity Vixen teammate, Morgan Chafin in 6th. Estevaville in 7th. Britt Mason taking 8th. Anna Strelo in 9th. And Chelsea Harris holding on for 10th place out there today. So, Frankie, a lot of familiar names out here, but some new names working their way up the list here in the Echelon Racing League.
Yeah, V Win, what an incredible ride. I mean, she averaged 5.83 watts per kilogram. That's the second most out of everybody. Stephanie Seidlich, who went off earlier, 5.97 watts per kilogram. But Godby, once again, she knew she was a little bit down on time. And again, that's the first time I've really seen her stress and push herself to be able to take that win. And that's a great time at 10 minutes and 3 seconds. And that'll give her an average of 5.57 watts per kilogram.
Yeah, it's very rare that we get to see Jackie Godby ride the way that she did today.
Normally she looks so controlled. She's like very rhythmic. And this time I saw her definitely, realizing what was happening and not wanting to be able to lose out, wanting to be able to take that virtual yellow jersey. And so that was fun to be able to see her, the amount that she was breathing, even seeing that pain face, which you don't really see that often off Jackie Godby.
It looks like Jackie Godby just getting ready to chat. Let's see if we can grab a word with her here.
What am I doing?
Jackie, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
All right, let's grab a word real quick, as I know you're cooling down after a tough ride. This was such a unique course out there today. I love watching these short time trials because it puts riders like you in a different place, riders that are used to these long time trials. Doing a short effort like that, how different is that from the other efforts that you've done here in the Echelon Racing League?
I mean, I can tell you I was about 9 minutes happier than I was 2 weeks ago doing that long TT. So that was really my focus tonight, thinking of all of those 20-minute TTs where I wish I could have been done earlier. I was like, today you get your wish. And that was my motivation for going hard.
How much recon went into this one? I mean, did you learn anything from the Redlands time trial? How similar was this one to that relatively short Redlands time trial, even though this one was shorter?
Yeah, so the Redlands time trial, when we talked about it last week, we said there was absolutely an element of negative splitting, saving for that back hill. And here, again, you said it during the men's race, there is no element of that today. The first hill comes early. You've got a hill into the finish. Maybe you get a short break when you go down that hill, but, in terms of recon, I actually got to watch my fiance, John Cooper, do it twice, once last week, once this week. And he experimented coasting on that hill the first week, and then pushing, not quite his threshold pace, but still a pretty hard effort on that downhill this week. And he beat his time by over 20 seconds. So, there's not even really that pause. You get a moment to reset, forget how much pain you're in, and put yourself right back, but not enough time to recover.
You are maybe the most prepared rider of the Echelon Racing League because you already have your winner's jersey ready to go here. I see the Arkansas State outline on the jersey. Where did this jersey come from?
So this actually came from the first virtual Joe Martin stage race held on Zwift in April last year. It was actually my very first pro race series. So I am particularly fond of this race, and this is my Queen of the Mountain jersey. Very, got to test my chops against a lot of world-class riders. Didn't get the finisher's jersey, so that's the goal for this weekend. But definitely had a lot of fun climbing the mountains, and I'm really excited to see I'm really excited to see how the real world courses play out on RGT. And just a shout out to one of the women in this race. I have the hill climbing jersey, Christy Tracy. That was the first time I went head to head with her. She put out some fantastic sprints in the race, and we were, going back and forth on the jersey titles right there. So I'm really excited to see her for another matchup today and tomorrow.
So the battle continues here in the Echelon Racing League, and I can't wait to see you guys matched up in real life soon as well, because I know it's going to happen. We're going to get you guys together in some of these races, and we're going to see this battle unfold on some real roads. Congratulations on another win, Jackie. A little bit of rest tonight, and then back at it tomorrow for the road race. Good luck tomorrow.
Okay. Thank you so much. Have a great night.
All right, so Godby taking the win out there at 10:03, fastest time of the day. Christy Tracy in second and V Win in third. Frankie, final thoughts from the day out there today as they prepare for a long road race tomorrow.
Yeah, it'll be completely different, a long road race, as you just mentioned. And, Jacqueline Godby, again, really showing that battle with Christy Tracy is motivating her. And I got to say, super impressed by V Win. Fastest split, and she to hold up right there and only be 24 seconds back on Godby, who's an exceptional time trialist, but right now sitting top 5 overall, because you got to include Stephanie Sidlick, who went off earlier, and Lauren Matson Co. Really, things are shaping up for a great road race and criterium for this Joe Martin stage race in the women.
Phil, our road race tomorrow is significantly different than the course that the riders saw today. It is long. It is tough. It is a classic Arkansas Joe Martin stage race course. Take me through what we're seeing tomorrow.
For sure. It's in the real world, it's definitely out of town and a long loop. Do it a number of times, depending on the men and the women. And the hills, the wind, the rain, tornadoes. We've had tornadoes, hailstorms, had to hide in barns before. It's crazy. So I think similar conditions tomorrow can play out as far as
luckily
unexpected things, right?
Luckily, none of those conditions on RGT yet. We don't quite have the technology yet to hit the riders with hail and rain. Although, Frankie, the way things are going, I'm sure that's coming soon. We got the smart fans connected now. They got the things that raise and lower your front wheel. We saw the new Saris rocker where you can move side to side. It's only a matter of time before we get realistic weather for riders on the trainer. It's just what you need, Frankie.
Well, if you have the flyover with the colors at the start of the race, I mean, we can definitely get some rain and some wind going in there. So, we'll start pretty soon. We'll start seeing echelons forming out there, but it's going to be exciting. I know it's a mountaintop finish for tomorrow, and I know the bottom part of the climb is very, very steep, and then that's going to be the deciding factor. So again, a long day. How much do you save? Do you try to get away early to try to get a gap? Are you a good climber or not? A lot of strategy and tactics that take place.
We are looking at a 12 o'clock start time for Pro Men tomorrow. We certainly hope that you'll join us here in the Echelon Racing League. Again, 12 o'clock Eastern for our Pro Men starting tomorrow for Stage 2 of the virtual Joe Martin stage race. We're going to wrap it up there for Phil and Frankie. My name is Brad Soner saying thanks for watching our opening stage of the virtual Joe Martin stage race. We'll be back tomorrow, 12 o'clock Eastern for the road race. See you then.